Planning an event and wondering how you can give your attendees the best experience possible? Take advantage of customized meetings with Hilton that make it easier than ever to incorporate health, wellness, and great breaks. Hilton will help you build an extraordinary meeting that attendees will remember. To book your next meeting or event, go to meetings.hilton.com.
Are you followers?
Okay, so we're gonna probably add
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Cormanick.
Welcome to GatherGeeks. Beth Cormanick is on assignment this week, and I'm being joined by Alex Carter from Zkipster to help conduct an interview with André Wells, who is the owner of Events by André Wells, one of the premier event designers out of Washington, D.C. Some of his clients include the others. Today we're talking about the concept of sparking change, a series that we're doing in association with Zkipster on the idea of how event organizers use events for the ultimate purpose. Let's listen. So André, thank you for participating.
Glad to be a part of this.
We like the fact that you're part of our Making Change event organizer photo essay campaign that we're working on with Zkipster, and we really appreciate you doing it. And we are really here also to learn about how you're in the most powerful city in the world. Of course, some people may debate that, but you have a responsibility to make sure that what you do has impact.
Sure.
And we want to start off with, how do you know when your events have impact, and how do you approach an event to create impact? And Alex, do you want to preface this a little bit before we start?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, David. So this campaign, I think, is a really interesting one to get into. A unit of an event where you often think of that happening over a night or a day or maybe even several days, but with impact that can spread beyond that. So when you really have access to people for a limited capsule of time, and it's a moment when you have their full attention, how do you use that, and how do you make that then last beyond and see the results of that in the world?
What an amazing question.
Not easy.
No, it's not an easy question, and I think about that often. I say there are no dress rehearsals for us. We get one opportunity. And so how I approach an event is I really think about, I have a lot of questions to myself about the event. I have a lot of questions to my clients about the event, but I want to know, what is the goal? What are we walking away with? And how do I do that in 1 hour, 2 hours, or 4 hours? I think it starts way before the event, because I think you have to curate the guest list, right? Because the people really make the event. And when we talk about Washington, we know Washington is made up of so many V.I.Ps and so many powerful people. It's the center of the political universe in the U.S., we'll say, as we're on 16th Street, which is the political and which is the center of the universe. But starting off by curating who's in the room, the logistics of what are they going to do? Where do they go? When do they speak? Do you wait? Do you do it as soon as people get there? How are people going to, measure your event? So that's how I start. I start with first curating. And then after we curate a great guest list and we think about the possibilities of people really showing up, and how can we get them there? How can we make sure that they're there? So a lot of times we think about different hours in the day, Is there a vote going on? So I think you have to be fully aware of your surroundings, wherever your event is, and to make sure that there's no other conflicts and you have the right people there. And then I think once you get there, I always say you have a captive audience. So if you don't use your time wisely, it's going to be such a waste. So then we curate the evening. I know no one in Washington gets anywhere but before 6:30. So if you do an event that starts at 6 o'clock, more than likely it's going to be a flop. That's supposed to be an evening event. It's different if it's a brunch or a lunch or something like that. But if you're doing an evening event, I know whatever I do, I'm not going to start any kind of program before 7:30. And that program needs to be brief. And we live in an era of, we're all about swift, fast movements. We are about instantaneous, right? When you look at the millennial movement, they like things now, happening, fast. So whatever we do, we try to do it in a compact era of time. So we've curated the guest list, so we know that's going to be right. We've thought about all of the movement and the logistics of the event, and now we have to capture our audience.
So how do you say it's not a dress rehearsal. Mm-hmm. How do you prepare that to know that that is the right thing to do to make change? And how do you know if you blew it?
Well, I think if it's the right, if you've done a good job, because of course people are going to talk about it when they leave.
Is it still coming down? Is the ROI still the feedback that you get, or is there a quantifiable way to get feedback to know that something has changed? Is it still the Wild West in terms of how do you know whether it worked?
I think it's still partially the Wild West, but I think people like things in real time. So I think, people talk. People have their social media outlets that help move the message or move whatever the goal is. So if you're able to accomplish those things, it's great. And, I always laugh because when we do events out in Hollywood, people are always about the next thing. So it is a fast, instantaneous, it's instant gratification. If you don't say something that's going to please me in the next 10 minutes, I'm out of here. I stopped by to say hey.
Yeah, and I think with social media, it's an interesting point too, because with an event that, for special events, say, you may have something that would before be a very closed room event or something that is only accessible to very few people and in real time. But now with Instagram stories and YouTube and influencers broadcasting more on their channels, in a lot of ways, even if you have a highly curated guest list, it's still reaching a lot of people outside of that. So I'm curious what your approach is in a very connected world like this, and especially in moments where you are dealing with a very closed room that is then potentially spreading to a much wider audience. Is that something you factor in? Is that something you just let run naturally? Or how do you handle it?
Wow, I had to think about that one a little bit. We recently did an event that had a lot of powerful players, and it was kind of an audible, as they say, an 11th-hour decision. I said, you know what? We haven't done this in a long time, but we're going to do a receiving line, and we're going to welcome each and every one of these people, and I want you all to be here at the door and say welcome, and we did that, and people loved it. They were shocked because they weren't expecting that. And it was an evening event. It was a cocktail reception. It was an evening event. It was a cocktail reception followed by a dinner. So after the cocktail reception, we had all of these guests who were our VIPs who you wouldn't normally be able to touch and feel. We had them at the door. And people, the access, the touch, that helped because then they were able to not only shake hands, take a photo with these people, but then they were also actually able to go out and spread the word and show that. And, it brought a lot of feedback to the event.
I have this sort of theory that, we're all kind of about intimacy and that usually you don't get to touch the principals and things like that. Are you seeing more and more of that as part of the change theory about doing that?
Absolutely, because I think people want to feel connected. People want to feel comfortable, just like a lot of companies are dressing down. The CEO and the secretary and everyone is working in an open environment where you can see, touch, and feel. And I think people like that. They like knowing that, oh, David wants a cocktail just like me. It's 5 o'clock. And we do a lot of actually less VIP because I kind of, in a sense, don't like that. That's more on the political fundraising side.
To get the right money, people to the right photo op.
Absolutely. But I think if it's an event everyone is a VIP. Everyone should be able to touch, feel, and connect it, and especially if it's something that's going to be a repeat, because you want to make sure you are able to get that audience the following year and build on that. So you don't want to come across as elitist, and you want to.
As an explanation of this theory through your career, what is the Goosebump events that you've produced that you actually felt the change happening in the room while you were there?
I'll tell you one event that comes to mind is we do this event here in Washington, Knockout Abuse. And, and I've done it for many years, but we've started almost like a, $500. This is what $500 can do for these battered and abused women. This is what $700 does. This is so people can really see. And you know what? This is what $100 does. This is what $5 does. It really helps. So when you do a kind of cattle call like that, it's really been so helpful. And I could really see, like, this gives everyone an opportunity to help and feel like they're helping.
How does that work? Give us an example of how does that actually happen?
We have an auctioneer, and we have him, and we started doing the stage in the center of the room.
So it looks like it's a boxing ring, basically.
No, that's fight night.
Oh, fight night. I'm sorry,
yeah,
that's the competitive one.
It's the all. Yeah, it's not a problem. It's the all women's event.
Okay.
And we put the stage in the center, and it's a night of, we call it Ladies' Night Out, and we have a lot of silent auction items which are located in another room, and then we have a lot of live auction items that we do, big trips and such. But we decided, we needed to do something that really appealed to the masses, and what would that be? And that's when we decided, let's just do a kind of a cattle call, so to speak, of what your donation does, no matter how big or how small it is. You can see how it, contributes to all of these centers that Knockout Abuse gives to. And that's what we did. And so that's what we did. And we had the auctioneer, he started out with, some large amount, and you had people give, and he goes all the way to $1. And it's amazing how much money you raise with that, and how much people feel like they're part of the community and connected.
How about on the conference side, when you do
it's an appeal.
Mm-hmm. When you do conferences, is there, and you're trying to create change, at what point do you see the light bulbs go off in people's heads that it's working?
And to add to that, has a guest ever said something to you that just made you think, wow, that worked? Or conversely, wow, that completely missed the mark?
Well, I think, again, to me, what I've seen for myself is people like being included. So people like when they're, and I think actually, David, you did this some years ago, and it kind of introduced, it was like, whoo, like that idea where after you have some type of speaker, then you have these round tables that people are able to go to and talk about, some topics maybe that the speaker spoke about, but things that are important to them and how it relates. And that works because people then feel like, wow, not only did I learn from what that speaker said, I was also able to go back to my table and talk about some of the points that I agreed and disagreed with, and things that I would do, and I heard things that they would do. So people like that, and they're like, that was a really interesting concept. Thank you. I don't think people like being lectured where it's so boring. They like being more part of the community, and they like being more of the, feel good.
You're buying into my concept that event organizers need to be collaboration artists as opposed to just event organizers.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you 130%.
But you're known for incredible decor and design and creating these temporary atmospheres that transport people to another world. How does that impact change? How do you see the actual use of decor and design to permeate, to get into someone's brain that they can think about something differently.
Well, it's perfect because tonight we're doing an event and it's a launch of the 2 new networks. So when I thought about it, how do you bring all of these, they're 2 totally different networks, but there's a way that I need to have a seamless party or seamless event, and it also needs to be fun. So I thought of this Wordle. I asked each company to send me adjectives that describe their company, or their network. And they did. So it's these powerful words that you think, oh, wow, and you're associated with. And we not only do it on walls, we do it on cocktail napkins, we do it on the bars. So you have all of these things that you're inadvertently digesting and you don't realize it, but you do realize it because we're beating it into your system over and over. And it's fun. And they're very creative. The words are big. Some are 6 feet tall and then some are like in fine print. So it's really interesting, and I think that's a very interesting concept of how something that's kind of ethereal relates to something that's bigger, and it's something that sinks in, and you're like, oh, I like that.
Is there an André rule about how many times you have to put the message out? Like in television, there's a certain number of messages at an event to get that message across. Is there some technique or some idea, or you just...
It's not a rule, but I think you have to have a vision, and it needs to be clear and concise. One of the companies, they sent something back, but it was kind of wrong, even though you might say, oh, that sounds so simple, just words. But what they sent back, it was more let me see, what's the word?
Like a marketing.
Yeah, it was more of a marketing piece. And it was like, no, that's not the point. This is to be fun. It's to be creative, and it's to get people to think. It's not, we're going to show a sizzle, but this isn't the sizzle. This is the underlying message.
So what you're kind of saying, it's not about preaching, it's about discovery.
Correct.
In many ways, too. So that in order to make change, they have to come to it. You can't just hammer people over the head.
No, because they want change if you hammer them over the head. Just like you tell the child, like, I told you to clean up your room, clean up your room, clean up your room. But if you send the subtle messages like everything has a home and you start putting things where they go, eventually it sinks in.
So there's that on the guest side. I'm curious a little more on the client side too, that in that sense, you might have clients who have a great purpose for the event that you're working towards, but how do you navigate if what a client is providing, maybe is maybe more self-serving than it's going towards the purpose of the event? Or how do you steer the ship with multiple parties like that, making sure you're all moving towards this purpose of the event, not just what people want necessarily?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to tell you the truth. It's sometimes very hard. It's not an easy process because, everyone, or, of course, all of the smart, successful people have goals, and they have reasons that they produce events. So you want to make sure that you listen. And I try to really listen to what the client is saying intently. And you have to be able to illustrate. You have to be able to give decisions and just show how things work. Or, for instance, in the example that I just gave you, I'm like, we don't need to do that because we're going to show a sizzle. That's more of your marketing. We're going to have a step and repeat. But this is another way to get your message across without really, beating people over the head and they're not really wanting to be a part of it. And then you do fun stuff like that too, and an activation, which they like, and people don't even realize that's what you're doing. They say, oh, I like that. But then when they go back and when they talk about the event, there's pictures, there's this word, there's greatness. And then I saw that here and I saw it in the restrooms. And I was like, okay, I get it. And I think that's how.
We're going to take a little break and come right back after this message from Hilton. So when's the big event? Hilton's here for planners with their exclusive customized meetings. Become a wow maker and save time by letting Hilton help you present an extraordinary event
one that leads to memorable and meaningful connections. Visit meetings.hilton.com and let Hilton help you. We learn a lot by what doesn't work. Do you have any bombs that you've seen in other people do or that you've done that you know you'll never do again because it doesn't create change or it just is it's boring or whatever? Is there any things that you can help our listeners to say, don't do this?
Yeah. We do some of our, one of our sweet spots is galas, sit-down dinners. I think a lot of people miss the mark on those things because I think there you have a captive audience. You can't give them too much information because you're going to lose them. They're going to tune out on you. So I think I always tell my clients, you got to do a dynamic, and especially in a world where we live in that's so digital, you need to do a dynamic 3-minute presentation about who you are, what you are, where you want to go, and it needs to be dynamic while you have their attention. It needs to be basically as soon as they sit down. And if you're going to have a speaker, it needs to be very precise, and it needs to be, you have to give them a limit. They can't go on and on. We don't live in a world now where people want to hear people talk. It's just too many, they're podcasts, they're bloggers, there's so many different ways, so they don't want to hear that when they're there. They want to know.
So how do you tell, I just gave $1 million to this thing. Don't I have to get it and make a speech? How do you tell them no?
No, you just tell them. You're able to show them. You're able to say, hey, listen, we want people to enjoy it. We would rather you go to that person's table and talk to them and tell them about the organization. Or we would rather show your testimony on the big screen so they can see you, rather than you standing here talking and people are talking to their table mates, drinking their glasses of wine. It just doesn't work. So, for us, I think people miss that opportunity when you have everyone's captive attention. And then a lot of people wait to the end of the program to do that.
But that's the kiss of death, right?
Yeah. I'm like, don't do that. You start off, have an amazing cocktail reception, feed them, give them drinks. And as soon as they sit down, boom, your program could be over in 15 minutes. And you'll have the rest of the night to do that.
Is that what you're programming? Are you programming for the, we did a whole thing on first impressions, but are you programming up until the first 15 minutes of dinner and then not worrying about it?
Because I think you lose their attention after 20 minutes.
Yeah, even no matter how fancy the evening is, or whatever, I
don't think you have to do that. If all of your ambassadors have been doing their jobs to lead up and the night has been successful, basically you are thanking them, you are showing them what you've done, you're showing them where you want to go. That's it. Yeah, yep. It doesn't take longer than that to do that.
And speaking of where you want to go, I think a really interesting part of this dynamic is what happens after the event, what happens after the lights go out. And you raised an interesting point earlier that when you do have annual events or galas or something where you do year over year see people and you want to build that up and you want to retain people, you do have some kinds of metrics for keeping track of that, whether it's numerical or qualitative or what have you. But I'm curious to hear more about your thoughts on what success is after the event, like how you can see afterwards that you think you've helped people spark a change.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think whatever your goal is, if you met the goal, be it a financial goal, be it a number goal, being it a learning goal, I think that's the number one. That's how we determine that. And then I think your follow-up. I think missed opportunity is when people don't follow up after events. I think there's so many talented videographers that can put together a 2-minute spill, and you, speaking of the captive audience, you've captured all of their information, all of your attendees' information. You need to be able to send, boom, that video to them by the time they walk in their office the next morning, or if it's a weekend the next day, and say, thank you for coming, and you've captured that whole thing. While they're on the dance floor, your videographer and your content provider are getting all of these facts, raised $700,000 on the silent auction, another 1.2 million in live and ... whatever facts there are. We learn that 60% of whatever. And that's it. You can send. I think it's follow up. And I think also, how you follow up throughout the year.
What's the attention span, though, of the excitement of the moment? Is it 24 hours? Is it by the time you get to the valet parking guy? Like, where does the excitement end and they tune out no matter what?
I don't know. I really don't know. That's a good question. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know that answer. I don't know that answer, but I do know is people don't tune out if you make them feel good, because it's about how they felt. They may not remember how the flowers
sounds like
looked.
Somebody we know.
Yes, absolutely. Maya Angelou, right? It's how you made them feel. People remember that. They really do. So, you want to make sure the whole experience, it goes back to what I said first, that the whole experience is curated well. Because if I just gave $500,000 and I have to wait 25 minutes for my car at valet, I'm going to be pissed off.
Yeah. And
I'm going to be really angry.
Yeah.
And you don't want that.
The people that do the biggest conferences in the world, like I just interviewed Richard Adius, who does World Global Forum in the beginning. He said they can have the best program, the best people in the world, but if there's a snafu from getting to the airport to the venue, it kills the whole thing.
Oh, yeah. Because people, they get cranky, they're in a bad mood, it's...
So you have to be in the mood to create change, too.
I like that, yeah. Well, that's curating the experience and making sure all of the logistics are good and making sure that your staff is knowledgeable and you make people feel welcome and they know what to do next and they're not just standing around and there's no dead space and there is just, vibrance and I don't know where to go next. Those are the things that make people like, wow, that was awesome. I'm coming back there again next year.
So on this, your enthusiasm is always contagious. And we think that event organizing, you have to consume inspiration for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I want to find out where you get your inspiration from. And I want to just mention something and you tell us what you think.
Okay.
Fashion.
Oh, absolutely.
What are your brands?
Oh my gosh, I love Ralph Lauren. Carolina Herrera, she is amazing to me. Gucci, lately they need to get that straight as it comes to race relations and such. And then I like a lot of small brands. I like a lot of a lot of people are doing the custom suits, and custom bespoke clothing. A lot of little brands and a lot of women and men who aren't big name fashion designers, but they do amazing work, and I really like that.
Okay, let's go into spirits.
Okay.
Drinks. What drinks are the hot drinks that you think the brands that are doing the best in terms of curating?
I think that P. Diddy does a great job with Ciroc. I love his marketing campaigns. I like all of its flavors. He's adding a new flavor every day. I love it. And he has a good tequila, too, as well.
How about music? Genres, artists, songs?
Oh, yeah. So much music. I'm in love right now with that whole A Star Is Born soundtrack with Lady Gaga and Bradley. That was amazing. The guy from Atlanta, he's so creative. I'm having a brain freeze moment. Yes, Childish Gambino. He's amazing. I like him. I like Travis Scott when it comes to hip hop.
Okay, what about food? Where are you in terms of cuisine for what favorite restaurants in Washington? Let's start with that. Advise people when they come to Washington, because Washington is now becoming a food capital. It's unbelievable, kind of. Mm-hmm. It really is amazing. Mm-hmm. I mean, what is your, what?
Well, you know what, David? Because I think the caterers here do such an amazing job, and I'm out and about a lot, and I get to see all of these things. I like dining casually. So I like fun places like Bethesda Crab House. I like quiet. I like quiet places like the City Club. I don't like a lot of the restaurants that you can't make reservations at. I'm old school in that way. I like a lot of the restaurants and bars up and down 14th Street Northwest, which there's so many.
And people, if they don't know Washington, it's completely, I grew up here, it's converted to a completely food heaven.
Oh, yeah. There's so many different restaurants, and there are different restaurants opening all of the time. And honestly, it's good and bad because, you know, I'm kind of a Cheers guy. I like to go where everyone knows your name. I like to go where, you know, people know who you are and you know the owner, and it's, you know, you treat them well. I'm old school in that kind of restaurant way. Like, I love when I'm in New York, I think they do a great job of all of the retailers. And since I have such a fashion background, I mean, I love Barney's, the restaurant there, and the restaurant in Neiman's.
But you said you like to go where they know your name. Mm-hmm. Bringing it back to the change, do you think that in order for people to change, you kind of need to know your name in terms of to have a discussion so you're being heard? Is that part of I'm sort of reaching here a little bit, but I'm trying to figure out how you relate it back to an event and how you make it so you're at your family event.
I think it's good for people to know your name. And also, I think that nowadays we have a lot of great marketing platforms for everyone to know your name before it happens. Think about it. Like, you've introduced with your platform, BizBash, us to so many people before we even knew them. So then when you meet the people, you feel like you know them. And I think that that's one of the very positive things about this whole social media movement. And I have a little boy, and it's different. You know, he goes to a night school, but when he just moved to this new school about 2 years ago, he already knew everyone, because I was like, how do you know? He didn't feel like the new kid. So I think it is important that people know that. And then, you know, as we've, you know, you go to all of these conferences, and I think that meeting planners actually do an amazing job at it, because I think the hype to build up to the event, the introductions of the speakers, the excitement, you know, look at, Sade at Inner Circle and Engaged, how the buildup is so amazing. People are so excited. And then when I get there, oh, David Adler, I follow you. I know who you are, you know, and that's what it is.
That's
so yes, yep. I do. I think it's important that people know your name and that you know their names or know who they are. You know, and it just gives this level of excitement.
Right. So the last question I have is, okay, we love this event industry. It's very powerful. What do you want to change? Like, what issue, what thing that you want to use, this thing that you know? I mean, what is the big issue that you want to use to change the world through events?
Wow, my 2 minutes of fame, huh?
Yes.
How would I change? So can I have you clarify that question a little bit more? The industry within
No, I'm talking about in general, your life. You want the world. Like you want to do an event and you want to end discrimination. Do you want to change how people do X, Y, and Z? You know, it's a climate change. What are the things that you think that you can use the power of events to do in your personal life? Like, would you do events for free for X?
Yeah. I would definitely do events for free for helping underprivileged children, because I think that so many people don't have the opportunities. And I'm a big believer in education. That's why I was totally disgusted with that thing that just came out this week where people were paying for their kids to get into school. And these people work so hard. And I think about all of the underprivileged children that never have the opportunity to be able to learn. So I would definitely.
Well, on that note, André, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, André. Wonderful conversation.
Alex.
Thanks for listening to GatherGeeks. I wanted to thank Claire Hoffman, who is our editorial provider on the podcast, Rebecca Pappas, who is in charge of distribution, and Dave Nelson, who is our producer. So until next time, this is David Adler signing off for GatherGeeks.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter at GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on.